Perhaps it's inevitable, but I look at today's passage through the lens of being in my 6th year in Vancouver. I haven't lived elsewhere in Canada, although I have visited 8 other provinces. But as evidence that my Vancouver experience may be representative of a Canadian tendency, I'll cite what happened when I was working in Australia. I missed a client meeting held early on a Monday morning. My boss was not happy. But then he backtracked and said he was to blame for not reminding me of the meeting when we parted Friday night. Actually, I didn't see it that way. I thought I was entirely to blame, although I didn't think that missing the meeting warranted writing the letter of abject apology that Colin made me do. The relevance of this? Colin was Canadian, originally from Montreal. Holy Trinity is staging some event of some sort. Posters are displayed. It's put on our social media platforms. Gradually, it makes its way up the listing on the bulletin. The Sunday before, it'll get a verbal mention in the announcements. Why is it, though, that I'm left with the feeling that what's required, stroke expected, for someone to turn up is a reminder phone call the night before? Even so, I fear the state of the weather on the day concerned may be the determining factor. Nova thinks that we should have sign-up sheets and charge a nominal sum beforehand. Perhaps we should, but for now, I'm prepared to live in hope. Please turn to Matthew chapter 22, page 957 in the church Bibles. Jesus is talking about something more significant than, say, a potluck supper. At one level, he's talking about a wedding. And, yes, weddings are significant events. Barring death, people are only expected to walk down the aisle once. That's the theory, at least. But the wedding banquet is used as a metaphor for something even more significant, of ultimate significance: the kingdom of heaven. What can be of greater significance than where you'll spend eternity? Elsewhere, Jesus talks about himself as the bridegroom, with the church as his bride. Invitations would have been sent out months in advance. Most likely, they would have had those letters that even the most monoglot English speakers recognize: RSVP. The day approaches, and messengers are sent to those expected to turn up. The king is being most assiduous in this regard. Remember, you have a wedding banquet to attend first thing Monday morning. Remember, you're on the rota to do so and such at the service this Sunday. But they refused to come. The king persists. More messengers are sent, this time with tempting details about the menu. Everything is ready. come to the wedding banquet. And you'll get to hear Rio Samea Band. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. In Luke's account, we're given details of their excuses. I have just bought a field and I must go and see it. What? Right now? Won't the field be there to be seen after the banquet? I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Why didn't you test drive them before you signed on the dotted line? When a curate in Houghtonleigh Spring, one parishioner felt led to tell me, I won't be in church next Sunday. I'm going to the Sunderland Air Show. Frankly, I would have preferred to be in blissful ignorance of why Elizabeth wasn't there. I just smiled and held back from mentioning that we had an 8:30 a.m. communion. Then the ante gets upped. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. Given that they were subsequently killed, I dread to think what mistreated may have involved. One translation has treated them outrageously. We've moved from the realm of passive aggression, see last week's sermon, into all-out, full-on aggression. Our passage begins. Jesus spoke to them again in parables. Who are the them? Look back at verse 45 of the previous chapter. When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard Jesus' parables, they knew he was talking about them. That's who the they were, the Jewish religious leaders. And they weren't one bit happy about what Jesus was saying. They looked for a way to arrest him. Ultimately, they succeeded and had him killed. They, in theory, should have welcomed the Messiah. But when he shows up, Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, well, it was another story. He wasn't quite the Messiah they had in mind. Would it be inequitable to say he wasn't going to be in their pocket? But it had been ever thus. Jesus goes on to say in chapter 23, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees! You are descendants of those who murdered the prophets." We're back to talking the talk, but not walking the walk. Messiah? Right on. But watch out any Old Testament prophet who takes us to task about this. I recently attended training for the Life Explored course, a follow-on from the Christianity Explored course we ran some time ago. We were told about a conversation Rico Tice had. Rico Tice is Mr. Christianity / Life Explored. He'd asked two seekers where they were on a scale of 1 to 10 with regards to committing their lives to Jesus. One said a 5. She had trouble believing this, that, and the other about Jesus. The other said she was a 2, but she believed that Jesus was the Son of God who had died for her sins. At which Seeker 1 did Rico Tice's job for him. "Are you crazy?" she said. "You believe all that about Jesus, but you're not willing to follow him?" I hope that you agree that God, inasmuch as he's represented by the king in the parable, has been remarkably tolerant and persistent. He's been loving. But actions have consequences. Verse 7. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Judgment. And who can blame him? We struggle with the true implications of kingship. I'm not talking about the rather namby-pamby British constitutional variety, but the kind of authority and respect a king of Jesus' day wielded. Let's face it, we even struggle with the concept of servants. When visiting a historic house in England, I was told how many servants there used to be. And how many are there now? I was told how many, but then my guide quickly added, "Of course, they're not servants, they're staff." Yet, despite what I may have appeared to say about our own dear Queen, and by the way, I am a loyal subject twice over, being both British and Australian, we can think of the uproar, in Britain at least, when Helen Mirren said she was too busy to accept an invitation, command, to dine at Buckingham Palace. My passport states, Her Britannic Majesty's Secretary of State requests and requires in the name of Her Majesty. I felt like quoting that a time or two at the border. God is King of the full-blooded, full-on variety. He should command our allegiance and respect just because of who he is. In fact, he has every right to demand it. If I were God, I'd likely have given up by now. Fortunately, I'm not, just in case you're under any illusion. The true God persists even more. Verse 9. Go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find. If the first batch represented Old Testament Israel, second wave are you and me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thank God that he is not choosy. He'll let anyone in, even you and me. Except, there's verse 11. He noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. If only Jesus had stopped at verse 10. That would have been so much more PC, much nicer. I'm afraid I can even imagine this passage being read and preached on, ending at verse 10. Don't get me wrong. I'm delighted to see anyone at any time when it comes to a service or event. Even the rector has been known to arrive late. But we know, don't we? But there are times when we have to be punctual and manage to be so. The plane or ferry just won't wait for us. Perhaps it helps to think of the man in such a light. You're invited to dine with your boss at a posh hotel. 7 for 7:30. Right-ho, you say. But then you dilly and dally. You answer a few emails, decide to put the vacuum over the flat. I've been meaning to do that for ages. Stop on the way for a couple of pints with your mates and roll up half-cut at 10 p.m, still wearing your shorts, singlet and flip-flops. I don't fancy your chances of keeping your job for long after that. We're told that it was the custom back in the day for the host to make wedding clothes available at the door. The implication is that the man concerned chose to say, "No, thank you, I'll come in on my own terms." God is king. God is righteous. And God is holy. I dare not enter his presence, except I be clothed with Jesus. Don't look at me. Look at Jesus. For my pardon, this I see. Nothing but the blood of Jesus. For my cleansing, this my plea. Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Oh, precious is the flow that makes me white as snow. No other fount I know. Nothing but the blood of Jesus. Full disclosure. The man is thrown outside into the darkness, etc. Don't be that man. He got what, in effect, he was asking for. Don't be like that man. God invites all. But here's a paradox. How do you get to be one of the chosen? Simply by saying yes. Accept God's gracious invitation. Believe in Jesus, and you're in and get to share in his everlasting feast. Amen.